All right, I'll go ahead and get us started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to On the Park Bench, a public square conversation brought to you by the Congress for the New Urbanism. On the Park Bench presents interactive conversations with thought leaders in new urbanism and allied industries, providing an opportunity for the audience to engage in real time. The webinar series is a platform for CNU members to debate, and collaborate on pressing issues of the day. We're pleased that you're here to join us for today's webinar, A Black Urbanist Journey to an Accessible Queer Feminist Future, with Kristen Jeffers and Desiree Powell. And if you have thoughts, you can share them on #OnTheParkBench at www.tinyurl.com/OTPBfeedback. And be sure to join us for upcoming On the Park Bench webinars. You can join us next Tuesday, October 17th, for Authors Forum, Fragile Neighborhoods, with author Seth Kaplan, who wrote Fragile Neighborhoods, Repairing American Society, One Zip Code at a Time, with Rob Studeville as the moderator. And on Tuesday, November 28th, you can join us for Authors Forum, Climate Resilience for an Aging Nation, with Danielle Aragoni, who will discuss her new book on how communities with aging populations can prepare for climate change. And I will be moderating that presentation. And you can register online for both of these webinars at cnu.org/resources/ontheparkbench. And do not forget about CNU membership. On the Park Bench is made possible thanks to membership support, and October is membership month at CNU. Thank you to our CNU members for joining us on today's webinar. If you're not yet a CNU member, membership offers the opportunity to join an interdisciplinary network of new urbanist practitioners across sectors, professions, and geography. You can learn more about membership benefits at members.cnu.org. And please be sure to save the date for our 32nd Annual Congress. CNU 32 will be in Cincinnati, Ohio, on May 15th through 18th, 2024. This is the premier national event bringing together policymakers, planners, urban designers, developers, advocates, and more to engage with the trends and challenges related to building community. You can learn more at cnu.org/CNU32. And now for today's webinar. Kristen Jeffers was one of the first people to bring the concept of Black urbanism to the internet and social media in 2010 by purchasing and launching The Black Urbanist, which is now in its 13th year and continues to be a resource for Black urbanism at the intersection of feminism, disability, and queer trans life. She is the author of the forthcoming A Black Urbanist Journey to an Accessible Queer Feminist Future, a memoir and manifesto for Black queer feminist accessible urbanism. She also has a masterclass and writes a regular newsletter on Substack called the Black Urbanist Weekly. Finally, under the banner of Christ Pattern, she shares her own journey into a sustainable fashion and invites others to do the same. A sought-after public speaker and workshop leader, she resides in the District of Columbia with her partner and fellow Black queer feminist urbanist Les Henderson, and was born and raised in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Desiree D. Powell is the programs coordinator at CNU. She's an urban designer in her own urban planning design firm, DRBPTS, Do Right by the Streets, which focuses on placekeeping as a tool to implement temporary to permanent space activation projects in communities of color. Desiree centers her work from her lived experience as a Black woman, along with impacts of music, streetwear, and sport. She's a lover of sports and being active, coffee, and writing whenever she can. And I am Lauren Mayer, Communications Manager at CNU. As a reminder, please use the Q&A function to ask questions as they occur to you. Let's go ahead and start today's webinar. Kristen, over to you.
We've been doing this for so long, and I forget to unmute. Good morning to some and good afternoon to others. Once again, Kristen Jeffers, really happy to be here today. And of course, happy to do this with you. This is really, really awesome. So I guess I'll throw a few slides up here to kind of talk through kind of what I've been thinking about. So those of you who have been following what I've been doing for all these years, some of this is going to sound familiar, but if you've really been following me through the last few, let me think I've got some, let me try sharing again and get to the right page. Let's see. We just did our preview of this. Let me try again. And let me just refresh this Safari page, and then we'll get started with my thoughts on what I've been calling a Black queer feminist accessible urbanism. I mean, it has been a journey. It is a journey like every other journey into creating community. And yeah, here we are. It's still all right. So yeah, this is how you can contact me. Many of you have been following me on various social media networks as at Black Urbanist. I'm on LinkedIn with my given name. You can email me. You can go by the website. And Substack is the best place to find what's now the Black Urbanist Monthly. So, and yes, here I am again. I love my home state, but I also love being a district resident. And part of that is because this has truly allowed me, with all these intersecting identities, to choose dense urban places. I also don't mind bringing everything to the table because it does matter. In my life, it's mattered. Over these last 13 years, I've been through various iterations of my planning practice, my communication work, working with other communities, as well as living within my family networks and with my partner. And there's been so much that I've gleaned from just living as a person in the world. And so I like to say professionally that this is how I started, but yes, absolutely. The DC Metro map and a lot of maps have happened. My dad, he wanted his only daughter, to make sure that I always knew where to go. I always knew how to get something. And so he would bring home these maps. And then I developed a love for those paper maps that were still being issued in the early 90s. And so over time, I realized, okay, this could be a professional thing. But let's be honest. For me, I am a child of the Sesame Street generation. I would say I'm probably of the second wave of Sesame Street. Like the 80s and 90s is that core Sesame Street that I remembered. And for the longest time, I didn't understand what kind of community I lived in, and that Greensboro, North Carolina is one key example of mid-sized southern city, because it didn't look exactly like the Brooklyn that was on being portrayed, or Bronx, or whichever New York borough that was being portrayed on Sesame Street. And of course, I found this image on Google. I really love this because I actually do go to this Safeway in DC. I would have been thrilled to be in there that day. It's not actually my closest Safeway, but this is pretty much where I go to the store now. And between Sesame Street and also, and of course, the whole mission of Sesame Street, targeting Black and Latina cultures of New York City, and of course, globally around the world, really working to meet children and their families where they were, as far as where their communities were and what they needed. And so that's what I try to do in this urbanism and planning practice. But of course, as I just mentioned, very different world outside of my window. This is a grocery store that was built just 30 years ago, but by 20 years into its life cycle was already closed, has been various furniture wholesales, but this was a supermarket. We've had supermarket chains completely leave town. And I really wanted to show you all this gif, and I'm gonna kind of talk over this one. That these are, and this is pretty much our city limit. It's been the city limits. There are a few extra annexations. Those of you who are familiar with Greensboro know we just finished opening Urban Loop. But you're seeing how grocery stores expanded from downtown Greensboro, and over the years, we created a kind of suburbanized environment. So by the time I was born in 1985, this was the Greensboro I knew. I knew shopping malls. I knew strip shopping centers, a downtown that was still not happening. yes, we were also still had a lot of furniture and textile production. That's what pays the bills. That's what built our buildings. That's what our claim to fame is. And yes, as you're seeing this spread out, you're also seeing a degree of white flight. And you're also, if I were to if David were to update this map, which he hand drew a few years ago, and if you do this, if you were to look at this on Google Maps and look for those stores, you would see even less stores kind of on the eastern side. And also you might notice that our city limits relative to where our downtown is. And I might be able to yeah, I think I can actually draw on this. So roughly this is kind of where our favorite quarter is, Battleground Avenue. This is basically kind of the dividing line, the historic racial dividing line of Greensboro. So you can kind of see. And so I focus on a lot of the things that are relevant to, hopefully this line, oh dear, let me erase that line as we go forward, because like basically the next thing I want to talk about is that where housing was in Greensboro and just how and those of you who read this week's newsletter, I mentioned how these Smith Homes, this Greensboro housing project was built for white families. Then it became a Black family. Then we bought a home on a few blocks down, which is on my next slide. So I'll just go ahead and advance to it. And yeah, this is the street. This is just right down the street. This is the street that I rode my bike on. This is the street, like we would walk around the corner. We also had a branch of that same chain I just showed you that was vacant. And by the time I was growing up on this street, that grocery store was a nightclub. And so I was starting to notice a lot of spatial things. I was also starting to notice like how much housing was, how much my parents were paying. And so, and of course now, the house that my mother is in currently, near one of our enclosed shopping malls, not the preferred enclosed shopping mall, we're getting all the housing tax. And I know for many of you, this is how you're getting into small scale development. But there are a lot of equity issues, and doing this kind of work, working with communities for housing is something that I 100% believe should be in tandem, because it is very annoying to get these texts to think about a place where we're trying to establish things that people say they want us to establish, like generational wealth and the American dream and stability and all those things. Yet, even in places that aren't as dense, we're getting these kinds of commitments. And so then there's my own story, and within the past year or so, my partner and I, because this is as of like this week today, we've been together for 5 years. And so we're at the point where we're thinking, well, what do we want to do long term? We both love DC. We both love our work in transportation and outreach and community development. Well, what are we going to do? Because now that we're ready, now that we have the finances, we're running into a different market. But there is a silver lining. Those of you who've been keeping up, know that we recently were able to take advantage of the District of Columbia's inclusionary zoning program and come to the District Wharf as part of one of their buildings where they are doing sliding scale for rents and everything. So we live in a very diverse building, economically, racially. We're not the only queer couple in the building. We're definitely not the only Black couple in the building. And of course, if you haven't been to the District Wharf, you should come and see us. Those of us who live in DC, we know. And even when I came in from being down in Greensboro over the weekend, I came in on Sunday night with the holiday weekend, and it's just vibrant. Areas like the District Wharf across the DC region, across the country, are those kinds of areas that are holding on to value, that are vibrant, because they have all the resources, they're not having the same problems that our downtowns are having. So, and of course, I still, as much as I've had advantages, as much as I've been able to move around the country, all the places I've lived, all the places I've worked, many of you are watching this or maybe watching this on repeat who have followed me various places. Some of you are not even up to date over like where I'm at because I pop up and I'm here and I'm there, I'm speaking there, I'm on your virtual screen. And I'm often, and especially within these last years, since we've been dealing with the onset of COVID-19 and other major pandemics, as well as just seeing the economic and also the racial justice things it's brought up, it's really made me think a lot about how advantaged I am to be able to do the work that I'm doing. And I really wanted to start putting that into a framework, especially as I saw how Les's world was different, as I look at my mom's world, as I look at other people that I love in my family, as I even try to explain what I do to my family, which is still a slight mystery. So I wanted to have, as we go into this next phase, kind of like many of our colleagues, like Jonathan Pacheco Bell, of course, Dee herself, and so many others. And of course, we all just had the session with Mitch Silver about talking about community harms and also how we do this work in tandem so that we know what people need and want, and we can come to a consensus on how that works. And so, of course, why does this matter? Like within the last few weeks, especially since I've moved into this apartment, things have really come together. Because for the longest time, it was like, okay, does this urbanism really work for me anymore? I know who I am. I know what I've branded myself as over these past 13 years. But you know what? And of course, those of you who know my yarn company, I'm like, well, maybe I should just go and get that goat and be done with it. But I let's see here. I think, oh dear, this is okay. This is a different version. Let me I'm gonna switch over and share with you. Give me one moment. I'm gonna switch over and share with you. That's the long version of this theory, but I really wanted to zero in today on some other key elements. And of course, go ahead and kind of get your questions together around a lot of this, because we are definitely there's definitely a lot more to like explore with all of this. So let me I'm gonna pull up my my short version here for you all. We mhm. One thing I will say while we're doing this today, just it is key to be flexible with all this work that we're doing. And I think one of the ways I've been able to be flexible over the years is because one of the key ways I had started doing this work was on the campaign trail. All right, so let us get to, yeah, now this is the question I want to ask today. So I've been able to make this choice somehow, some way, not just make the choice, but the resources have been able to come to me literally within the last year, literally within the last few months, literally working together, being in a partnership, because yeah, I want us to think about how that's looking for some of our single adults, thinking for people who have multiple generational families. So I'm going to kind of bring in some examples of that on why we still have struggles with choosing disturbing places. Both myself and others that I know that have a lot of the same identity markers. So key thing is affordability. I pulled so many like economic stats to prepare for this today, but I really just wanted to kind of center in here. So if you are working $17 an hour is now our new minimum wage floor. You do the math on that 40-hour week, you work, 5 days a week or so. We're still talking netting $2,300 a month. I'm happy to share, that we're renting at $2,000 a month. Those who average rent in DC know that that's much higher. At this point, you're not getting in a neighborhood like this under $2,000, and that's even in other metro areas. If I were to kind of be making this decision at home in Greensboro, I would be looking at $1,500, and of course, we have an even lower minimum wage. Digging into what the numbers look like, doing the math on how many people that the U.S. Census has identifies as Black. We're also getting more detailed numbers on folks who are disabled, who are of the LGBTQ community, who are, you know, female or feminine identified. And when you do those numbers and you think about days that we celebrate, like Equal Pay Day, Black Women's Equal Pay Day, Latin Day, Equal Pay Day. We're in Latin History Month. Yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day. Just thinking about all those times we pause and we honor all of our different groups, and then we think about what their economic struggles are. And even if you are making, there's also internal things. There's, proving yourself on a job. There's the structure, is that money coming from overtime? Are you on commission? We've been in a situation where commission dollars have scared away people. As a small business owner who operates on a profit and loss statement, and of course you see me, you're like, yeah, of course, Kristen, we love you. We would love to have you as a neighbor. But many management companies will look at what I've actually brought into the door, even though I'm very resourceful. It's still not enough. And a lot of us are facing that, especially in this post, I won't say post-COVID, because for me, it's not going to be post-COVID, but post-onset of COVID, rental environment, both commercial and residential. And of course, many of you are like, well, yeah, that's just how it prices out. But I'll get to that in just a moment. And then caretaking. So this is one example. One that if we have special things, and we would not still be here, especially with the way this onset of COVID has affected us in our household without that access to doctors. We live in the District of Columbia, the access to emergency rooms, the maternal mortality rate, all of those things are very real and very much effective of how we are seen. We're still, when we go to the doctor, we're still two Black women at the doctor. And in her case, she's a gender nonconforming person at the doctor. There are a lot of things that go on. And right now, being able to have a personal vehicle, and of course, if transit was stronger, we use that as much as we can. But emergency room at 3 a.m. when Metro is not there, what are we going to do? Even and sometimes even Ubers and Lyfts can be a little spotty at that hour as well, especially and of course, if you're outside of DC, that's kind of a given. And then even in this wonderful building, this building does not have 3-bedroom units. It only has studios, 1s and 2 bedrooms. And so I'm excited to see the advent of places thinking about grand families, but that's not so much a policy thing, but there are multi-generational families. And I know a lot of attention was paid to that during the time when we were really harping on social distancing, but this is reality. These are the families, and this is what they look like. What are we planning to do? If we can do the student units with the 4 and 5 bedrooms, why not think about that for our families? We will have to address that, especially as the market starts to look very differently. And if we get down into, you have someone like me in your neighborhood and you love them and they're great, and then one day you see the U-Haul and you're like, well, where are you going? Well, our mothers need care and there's no room, and we looked and there were only a handful of 3 bedrooms available, but they keep building all the production townhouses further and further away. We've done our best to stay near Metro, but we have to make this choice. And then of course, agriculture in general. I love my yarn community. I love farm fresh food. I'm the first generation in my family to truly live in the city. Like myself and my cousins, we're the first ones to live more in suburban and even dense urban environments. We know the power of being able to have the food and the clothing and all these raw goods available to us. We all love our farmers markets, but where do they come from? Many of those people do need acreage of land to be able to do what they are doing. Now, of course, this is a CMU webinar, and of course, many of you have read Agrarian Urbanism, so I know I'm preaching to that choir, but for many others who may be watching this video, keep in mind, how are we balancing agriculture needs, not just in urban agriculture schemes, but people who do need connection and need access to things and access to the market, like the classic market to table, farm to table cycle. So there are some people who are who are in need of having land because they use it. They use it to make our communities run. And likewise, during the onset of COVID-19, when we were scrambling for hand sanitizer, respirators, tests, getting to the hospital, like how many of us learned, oh, well, we don't make this nearby anymore. And then even the warehouse is a long way away. And for me, this isn't like bashing anyone in any other country. I think everybody should have the opportunity to make the things that they need, and then we trade and we share. Just like I I love going to yarn festivals, and even though it's all yarn, some of the dyes are the same. Just that joy of embracing the artistry of people. And so, as those of you as planners, placemakers, I want to kind of get us, and we're gonna kind of go into our question period here. Just let's think long and hard about what it means to provide equitable and just economic opportunities. Yes, for some of us, that's going to mean a temporary hit. And even now in my position, there are times when as much as I can, I'm donating to the GoFundMe's, because for many folks in our LGBTQ community and the Black community, those GoFundMe's and all those fundraisers are the difference between just being in a place or even thinking about like opportunities. Imagine what would happen if we didn't have to have folks always having to crowdfund and fundraise. Imagine what it would be like if we had a market that would support, yeah, luxury items. And maybe you make your money on the luxury items, just like the person upstairs from me pays, I think, about $7,000 to live here, but others pay different, and we balance that out. How can we get these balance sheets penciling out, and how can we, those of us who have had the means and the access to means and resources, be more willing to share and make it work for everybody? And then, of course, infrastructure. We're long past needing 24-hour metro systems. I'm excited that we're going to get a night bus, but definitely the train overnight, Amtrak overnight, access to food. The cities that are looking into creating city-run grocery stores and farmers markets just so that can be provided. All of us who are dealing with our folks who are underhoused, unhoused, and the benefit of being able to live somewhere. Like, I've been there. Like, I've been there where I've been like eating like beanies and weenies. That's what we always said. Beanies and weenies or something else. Or, I have friends who've helped me crowd serve. I've had to purge things like but knowing that we have the infrastructure is there, knowing the housing is needed where it's needed. Yes, building more housing is needed, and it can be everywhere. And there are all types of options. We can do that, and we have to do that, because even though I'm having this conversation with you today, so many others are having this conversation with us. And what they're looking at is, I need transportation. I need a house. I need healthcare. I need to feed my children. My children need a school that loves them and cares about them. And that gets into this last bullet and my last call for you all, and what I think is key. We need that trust level. When buildings like coming in and saying we're going to build a building in the community, especially when the community's wanted a new building, but then all of a sudden it seems like it's only going to happen because of the new economic opportunity. Of course, that's going to hurt. People feeling like they can't take public transportation because they're afraid of street harassment. Like, there is there is a saying, and we say it a lot in the Black community, especially, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to be people. Like, I'm going to add to that. It takes a village. And I look at my urbanism work, I look at this Black queer feminist accessible urbanism as a village effort. People who use mobility devices, people who have different brain processing, everything, skin tones, gender presentations. We're all humans, and we deserve to be here. And of course, we're thinking about like global conflicts, but what if we gave each other the tools, give each other the benefit of the doubt, care about each other, love each other, I mean, really, at the end of the day, and a lot of my work is so anecdotal because I want us, as we're crunching these numbers, as we are looking at this data, to not be afraid to be compassionate. So I'm just going to throw my information back here. I'm going to drop share and all right. It is your turn to ask all the questions.
Thank you so much. Before I let loose selfishly, I want to say again, thank you. Very grateful that we finally been able to have this conversation. Very timely, very, very long overdue. And as myself, as a follower for quite some time, it has been an inspiration to be in this space and exist in this space, not only as a Black person, but as a Black queer person. So from me to you, but I tell you this all the time, I thank you. I really appreciate it. Before I open up the Q&A, you answered most of the questions that we went over. So I'm only going to ask one of my questions. And it's the one that, as my career is changing and progressing, I ask myself often, and that I try to put in the forefront of the work that I'm doing. What does Black urbanism actually look like to you? When we talk about choice and accessibility through whatever means that may be, what does Black urbanism really look like?
Well, I always like to say that we're not a monolith, but we, in a world where the earth is telling us, hey, don't keep drilling in me too much. Hey, you're going to keep getting these storms. You know, you do what you want to do, but there are limits if you want to actually stay on me and thrive on me. So, yeah, when I take it back to what it means to be Black and in urbanism, it's really just making sure that we honor like ourselves. Like, you know, there's been all this energy about, especially there's this aspiration that we don't live in apartments, that we don't live in townhouses. I mean, we were forced into those housing projects and then they were underfunded, and that kind of put a sour taste. You know, the heavy days of drug use. And then of course now we're going through a time where so many people don't have other options besides violence, and it's scaring people away from sometimes coming to downtown areas. I mean, we got all these calls from people who are like, are you sure you want to move back into DC? You know, you move further out into PG. You know, there's you know, there's a lesbian couple there. We'll introduce you and you can be friends. But the thing is, like, for the climate, and I look at, to me, it's that rural and urban, it's that transect. It's some of that intermediate stuff got weird. You know, when I go back to the community I grew up in and grew up around, I look at how, even though we had property and we had farms and land and we had all different kind of houses, we still came together. We had the church community, and of course, you know, faith can be a touchy subject, but we had somewhere to gather. And of course, a lot of the people wanted, and we had different faith houses, but we had 4 of them, and then we had markets, and they were on a circuit, and they came together and they found ways to come together. I feel like so much of our urbanism practice is like coming together no matter what, no matter the form, making the form work for us. But it is nice when you don't have to cross 4 lanes of traffic. It is nice when the train works. It is nice when the food is like there and it works and the store is there and the kids can go to school, they can go to the playground, they can explore for themselves, whether it's through the fields or whether they're walking at home. And then there's folks that are around and they look down and they're in this, they have a spirit of wanting to help people. So that to me is what that looks like. It doesn't necessarily look like a certain image, but it's respecting what's there, and it's also respecting the humanity. It's even also calling out like internal family conflicts. It's calling out like even some forms, well, really to me, all forms of Black capitalism. I believe in Black commerce. I believe in us trading goods and services, but when you are like excited that you got all these people and you're the one paying them zero, and then you're this person, you're the picture of Black urbanism, when people are getting so excited about how many properties you can rent and everything, but it's people living in tents and that's not where they want to be, it's people struggling, then to me, it's really taking those resources and putting them together and meeting people where they are. Like, it's okay. You have cousins that want to go downtown for the first time in years. Okay. In my case, like, they don't all, most of my cousins, I have some cousins that live here. So I'll use the ones that live here in DC. So I would meet them at Branch Avenue Metro Station. We would go up together. If they wanted to use Metro, I would explain to them, you use your phone now, you tap in. Oh yeah, and that's right. You've been to the wharf. Now you see it. Oh wait, yeah, you can take the boat to Alexandria. Isn't that so much fun? Isn't that exciting? Wait, yeah, that's on the mall. Yeah, we got a sneaker store here now. Yeah, we got Shake Shack. Yeah, this Whole Foods is clean and ain't going nowhere. So really just bringing that joy back into the things that we thought weren't ours, taking up space and being there. And to me, that's what that is. I know what it is for me personally is like living in dense spaces, living in a diverse neighborhood, walking to the store, going to the concerts. It's a little bit different for everybody else. But the key is with climate change, we've got to think about that question for everybody.
For sure. That's it's a phenomenal answer. It's something that we talk about a lot. So I'm really happy that other people got to hear the breadth of what that looks like, because as you mentioned, it does, like, people are not a monolith, so it looks different. Really for every Black person, from like not even from region to region, just from like the person sitting next to you at the light or in the store. So thank you. I don't know if I didn't formally announce it, but the question of Q&A is open, so please try to put all your questions in the Q&A chat. We have a couple, so I will just start off with the first one from Mike Farley. He says, I recently worked with an apartment developer who had 200 plus units, none of which were over 2 bedrooms. I was told that there wasn't a market for three bedroom apartments. How do I convince future developers that there is a market, per your example?
Gosh, I think we got to think, we're so focused on market, but we're doing service work. When we're talking about housing people, but we've been looking at that market frame for so long. Yes, there is an opportunity to make money building homes, but it isn't necessarily going to match up with what people need. There will always be a need. And I think some developers know that and they're planning around that. And we have a large cadre of developers who are trying their best to work with funding, federal funding, state funding, as well as even some major corporations that understand housing people is going to build their workforce and allow them to come to the workforce. But others, really, it's another investment opportunity. And honestly, I think we need to be mindful when we are looking at and vetting developers. Are they there to help? Are they developing because they're building a community? Or is this another investment scheme for them? And then, of course, even tell them, hey, real estate isn't necessarily the best investment. There are other ways to invest. If you're just here for the money, maybe consider the stock market. Maybe you can look into commercial, but then don't look into commercial too much, because we want services. We don't want you sitting with vacant real estate. Like that whole scheme that some of these drugstores have started where they're just paying the rent for it to be vacant. That's not cool either. Like, that's not helpful. Find another place to put your money in. And then if you're no longer interested in building homes and creating a home structure, then maybe get out of the business. But then those of you who are interested in building homes, yes, there is possible. This is where we start going to our governments and emphasizing that this is something that we need, that there is a critical mass, and we get creative and we find those resources. And we ourselves, when we are resourced, we get ready and we say, okay, well, how can I be a resource? Even if I don't have the money, how can I walk people through the housing services? But I will say right now, it is very helpful. It has been very helpful to have the kinds of resources we have in DC, but it's not necessarily a market. And I think we got to be prepared for what it means to not provide housing as a market, but housing as a human right and as a need.
For sure. I hope that started to answer your question. But The next question was, what are some examples of truly equitable development in your perspective? Do any cities or neighborhoods in the States serve as good examples?
I mean, I'm a little biased right now. Now, granted, we just moved here a month ago, but literally to be in a building that ranges from 30 to 120 beyond AMI, and nobody is hurting each other. Everything looks great. And one of the things I do like about being at District Wharf is one, this was something that it was a waterfront. And yes, we do have our environmental piece, but that was considered. We may not be here forever, but at least right now we're utilizing this land. When we go to shop, there are multiple options. If anything, it's just people get here and realize, okay, I'm not necessarily into being in business and being in a community type business. So I want to go somewhere else. But I like what was done. I like the care that was taken. Some of the restaurants that have advertised their $10 meals are no longer on the Wharf website, but there was a lot of care taken in this particular neighborhood. And of course, there's been a lot of tours. There's been a lot of CNU tours. Of course, the people that are involved in CNU and ULI that have talked through the reasoning behind this. But of course, and then there's also a lot more affordable, like 100% affordable buildings. But one of the things that is missing is we don't see enough of folks affordable under 30%. For folks who are still understanding what that terminology means, and you're coming to this webinar and you're like, oh, I don't understand the numberings. We are here in DC, we're right at $100,000 as median. A little bit, maybe a little bit more. So if you do the math, 30% is literally $30,000. And so there are folks who are in that still, even with the minimum wage floor growing, but they're still built to even lower minimum wages, contractors, commission-based people, and still, where are they going to live? Plus, once you start adding household members, children, maybe other family members that you need to care for, those AMIs change. And so I am seeing the seeds to what works, but I want us to continue to do more. And I want more places to be comfortable with giving a person maybe an opportunity to pay like the top dollar. And I want that person that lives upstairs to know that just because some of us aren't paying as much as them, we're still good neighbors. And if you're running a company where you're deciding to pay us less than what it takes to live in here, maybe reconsider that. Like for me, it's like, I keep harping on that we have to change the paradigm, especially now that we live through a major societal shift. So many of us would not be sitting here today had we not made changes at the onset of COVID-19. So we're still in that phase where we're still figuring out what those changes need to be. We're only 3 years in. We're still learning things about what the illness does. We're also learning things about what that means for families and for ourselves and how we're functioning. So I'm going to say that where I live right now is a good example. But I'm going to continue to put that little nugget in that we have to continue to do the hard work of creating new examples. And some of that may require some sacrifice, but it will pay back. And it's vibrant. When I walk down here, when I walk downstairs and I see all these people here using this neighborhood, it's worth it. When I saw it at upwards until 10 o'clock last night on Sunday night, because we had the day off, and then on Saturday nights, it's worth it. So clearly people want these neighborhoods. The thing is, are we ready to meet them where they are so we can meet them with what they need?
Very cool. I hope that answered your question in the most thorough way possible, but also like I think everybody's gonna be biased to like what makes a good dense urban environment, especially as you have the opportunity to live in one. We got a couple, like 5 questions in the chat, so I want to make sure that I can get to all of them. So we got like 15 minutes left. So if we go over a little bit, I want to be mindful of your time and everybody else's, just putting that out there. The next question was, what are some solutions that you will be addressing in your upcoming book, A Black Urbanist Journey to an Accessible Queer Feminist Future?
Well, really just, I'm gonna this is going to be like, I've been anecdotal today. I've been throwing a few stats in there, but I'm going to be bringing some of those stats you see around like maternal mortality, like how many disabled folks are there, like how many, the states where queer folks are facing laws and rules and everything from the Dobbs decision. I'm bringing that into this urban planning context. There are folks who are not going to be able to live in your state anymore, even after you've done the incentives like paying them to live there. Or you might have to create a fortress around them, which of course is not going to necessarily create a community because it's going to be walled off. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to go into more detail over like my journey of, okay, yes, I benefited from parents who had access to like a credit union, who worked for a school system, who grew up on farms, and that nobody was looking at us twice for being Black folks with farms, and getting through things like air property and all those things. And then, yeah, there's going to be even more stories. There's going to be even more data. And it's really going to get back to, okay, if you're sitting in front of your Black colleague who you might have thought wasn't paying attention, you might have thought that they're just sitting in accounts payable and they're excited to get their paycheck, but what kind of city are they imagining in their heads? Like, what are, they, some of us I know are kind of been, especially around this, I would say the casino debate. That's one thing that's like key, because I know so many people like having that as a part of their city is a thing. How do we balance that with the potentialities of like negative externalities? But then again, we have beer gardens. Not everybody can handle being at the beer garden. So I really want to parse through some of those things. And I really want to take some of our urbanism gospel and really run it through. Okay, well, what if I was living this? And what if like my mom and my cousins and other people that are very different from me were living this, and what would they do?
Very cool. Very excited about the book coming out. I hope y'all are as well. The next question is an interesting one. So I know it's gonna be hard to be brief, but just so we can get to the other ones. But any thoughts on seeing you as a platform to discuss Black urban issues?
I mean, for me, and this is my 13th year of being involved tangentially, there have been ups and downs. Those of you know that. You've seen me there, and then you've not seen me, and you come back. But we allow debate in a way that some of the other places don't. We allow wild ideas in a way that some of the other places don't. Like, of course, you need your building to stand. So AIA standards are important. All the engineering standards are important. Even with APA and planning, there are certain things that are important, especially when you're dealing with a zoning code and enacting a zoning code that you're being given. But here at CNU, and it's, you just get to show up, you put an idea on the table, and then you have a lot of passionate people that will walk you through your idea. And then I've been able to watch over time things that we had on napkins, things that we dreamed about, things that we hoped for coming true. And so really it's just definitely want to stay the course. Now, I will say this to anybody coming that is Black and also shares, you do have to be willing to stand your ground. I know, especially if you're going on behalf of your job, you may not want to present a certain front, but find your people. They do exist. You're seeing some of them right now. Find them, find us in a safe space, and like find that safe space so you can have those conversations. Because dreaming is vital, and everybody in feminist studies has been talking about dreaming and rest is resistance. We need it here too. So that CNU has the nuggets and the framework and the opportunity to do that. If anything, we just need to continue to value that as a collective.
1,000%. And that's not just being biased because I happen to be a Black person that works at CNU, but it is a good platform and a good place of really starting to talk about those conversations broadly, and even in some like niche directions of how does CNU fit into this mode of Black urbanism and challenges facing Black communities and towns. Next question is, this is going back to what you stated about the market and what that looks like and what the market may be. So given that, how do you convince government agencies like CRAs, public officials, et cetera, to focus less on the market when they're so anxious about economic development? They seem so hesitant to push back against developers. And I would say this is in response to the previous question about like building 3-bedroom apartments, or basically residents defining the market. Like housing is not a tool of profit, rather something that people need. So that's
I think we have to not be afraid. Now, yeah, there's very real things that happen, especially in smaller communities. When you're the one person championing these changes, and it becomes a safety issue for you and your family to state it. First and foremost, we need to be able to have that conversation without threatening livelihood. Secondly, we need to start like building up that political education and that capacity and learning what it really takes. Like, I think about how people used to like barn raise, where they would come and build places for you. Of course, we do that a little bit on a small scale with building IKEA furniture. So, okay, I think we should take that opportunity, especially our libraries are open. Our libraries are often there to support us with finding information now. Of course, some other libraries now are trying to ban books, but there are others that are not, and many of them are available online. Really like girding yourself with enough knowledge so that when you get ready to go to city council, especially city councils that are very tone policing and like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear your tone. Why can't you wear a suit? Why'd you show up in your t-shirt? Why'd you bring all these people? Why'd you bring a banner? But bringing and continually bringing the facts, the numbers, the benefits, and also, maybe it might be time for you to be the one. But once again, it gets back to my first thought of make sure that you have the support system you need. Get people that know you and will know you whether or not you're like commissioner, whatever, whomever. Find those people that are good at grant writing. Like find your and of course I come from a church background. So I'm like, find your ministry, find your specialty in this. So that if it's you're supporting someone going to city council, or if you're doing all the number crunching, or you're getting people to come and testify, you're building that base. Or if you had to kind of go underground, or if you had to find other communities, continuing to build that community, as well as building that, I hate to say war chest, but we are dealing with some situations where violence is happening in the cases of asking for these things. But at the end of the day, making sure that you do your self-care practice. So if it is going to be you running for city council or zoning commissioner, or getting more education so that you can become this person, or in my case, for those of you who know my story and watch my story, it was me writing my blog. It was me every once in a while going to city council. It was me saying, okay, I'm going to go to another city. I love my hometown, but I'm going to go to another city and I'm going to be in community with these people. And I'm going to check in every once in a while. I'm going to check in with my family. I'm going to come and visit. I'm going to make myself mobile. I'm not going to be afraid of the people who say, well, you got to be a martyr for your community, because at the end of the day, that is a commonality that we're all communities. So that's kind of my advice, is really, I'm the person that's like helping you get your personal mindset ready and finding your friends and getting more education. And then when you come into those rooms where you're having to convince people, you try to convince people, if that doesn't work, and you create an apparatus to become the people, hands down. And if that doesn't work, then you do it somewhere else. So at least you haven't, that work isn't in vain, because there's somebody on this earth that needs what you had to offer. We are still a critical mass, even if we're not all in the same place.
Most definitely. So we got like 5 minutes left. I will say the questions that are in the Q&A right now will probably be the last one. So I'll do my best with Kristen to get through them as best, like as quickly and as concisely as possible. Next question is, how do you respond to folks who see urbanism as inherently white and hostile to Black neighborhoods?
Well, show up. First of all, examine yourself. and make sure that you're not still holding on to some internalized things. Like, it's that whole same argument where people tried to claim education was white and certain music was white. Especially, like, a good place to start is when you read music history, American music history, even especially this latest controversy with Rolling Stone magazine, you see that there's evidence. W.B. Du Bois, going all the way back and reading about him and others who were doing sociology of urban places and reading about the people who were in positions where they were developing land and in commissions and during Reconstruction. Reading about those ancestors and elders helps you root yourself in that some of these things didn't just show up after the civil rights movement, so that you know for yourself, okay, I have ancestors. And maybe as you're doing your genealogy, you might find family members. Now, that might be a little bit more of an emotional journey, but historical figures, we've been here, we've been there. And then it comes to having those conversations. And like I was mentioning before, maybe take your friends out for a kickback. Find a nice little like bar district and then point out, hey, we're still here. Like, I'm happy to share with people. This is how we got where we were. We're happy to help you connect with the agencies. This is a good agency. This isn't the greatest agency. So it's really taking the things that we want to do. Like, I love doing this, and I know what I see in the mirror every day. And I also continue to ask myself, am I showing up for people? Am I showing up for myself? Am I working on my anti-Blackness? And so that way, that kind of like burns everything else down when it comes to, is urbanism inherently white? If anything, it's like a lot of everything else in America. We were brought here to make it, and then we were demonized in making it. And of course, we replaced folks who had civilizations, and we're supposed to pretend that didn't happen. But knowing all that history and rooting in that all that history, that positive history, then you can go forward and create those new paradigms and these new ideas. I mean, urbanism is just one word. There's other words for the thing that is really creating the community.
Well answered. Couldn't have said it any better. Thank you. Thank you for the question also. Next question. If you had to pick just one improvement to Washington's transit to make it more accessible to queer Black individuals, what would you improve?
I really want us to figure out how we can subsidize the entire system without making this a thing about fare gates and fares and everything else. I want us to figure out that, okay, if the government's not going to be our main transit customer, who else is it going to be? Who else could put in? Like, when the teens pay for extra stuff, when Beyonce paid for extra service, how can we leverage, like, if we are going to be in a semi-capitalistic environment, how can we leverage these people with a few extra coins to offset the need for people to have that need access to the system? And we're not deeming those that need access to the system but may not have the money today. Or we're not demonizing our youth who may not remember to bring their cards today. And we're getting that capital budget together. And we're getting that 24-hour service. So really, it's really thinking about how we find new subsidies, how we find new revenue streams. And that's why I say I'm not anti-capitalism. I'm actually anti-capitalist, but I'm not anti-commerce. We create resources, we use resources, but I think we do need to remember that public transit is a public good, and be okay with what that means to provide as a public good. And our state jurisdictions, like right now, really, it's just state jurisdictions getting back to their funding that they were at pre-pandemic. That could be a huge change for us. So let's look at that. And then let's tap into our major corporates that aren't the feds. And then federal government wants us to come back 5 days a week. Get them to do more with making sure the system works and it's expanded, and we get all the lines we want, not just one in this latest expansion.
Cool. I think that could be applied to some other transit systems.
Yes. all transit systems globally.
Without Beyonce present. So last two questions. Thank y'all for hanging on. This person mentioned or asked, I'm a fresh out of university urbanist, and I'm just starting my professional journey. I often design having a big fear of the impacts of a project. as I don't have experience, fear to fail, or fear to fall into making a project that aims to help into something that has a negative impact. How do you overcome this fear or get the confidence to know in which direction to walk? Any green flag tips?
Well, I tell folks that are just coming out. So as someone who was like, I want to do this community work, and I was in a position where I could take a little pay cut or I could wait. And then there were times when I knew I had to go work for somebody I didn't necessarily want to be. I did, and of course I didn't listen to my elders when they told me to just keep learning, but I'm listening right now, and I'm going to tell you to learn. Like when you're sitting, like you're sitting in the room, and this is one time to be kind of sitting in the room and acting like that you're just taking notes, that you're listening to them, because you're not that person. You are employed, and when you're at your employer, especially in a first job, you're kind of there to learn. But while you're learning about other people, you're getting to know other people, start going to the professional groups, reach out to us because we know a lot of people, we know we've been through a lot of things. And then really decide what you want to do for your life, and how you want to do it. And like get patient enough to get locked in to do that pathway. But do not neglect your hobbies. Do not neglect your self-care. And when you're going in that job and you're seeing that, start that plan and write down what they're doing wrong. Because oftentimes there is somebody that wants to hear that from you, because that was me. I was writing down what people were doing wrong. I was putting it in a platform. And then here I am today where I'm sharing this and I'm saying we need to do this. And also don't be afraid to kind of go into a different realm, but still be that fan. Don't let anybody tell you there's something wrong with being a rail fan, especially if that's keeping you from continuing to have to work for a firm or a place that's doing the wrong thing. If you're over here working in a whole different industry, getting your money together, next thing you know, you get an opportunity to purchase a property. And then next thing you know, New York Times is coming and interviewing you because you created this like urban place. And then your old company is over here and their building's not working. Now, the horrible thing is that people are going through something. And that's why I say stay there only as long as you need to and move on and start working in other communities, getting to know other communities, doing what you can to work with other communities, and not being so set on, okay, if I don't work in this particular job, then I'm not an urbanist. Because sometimes it does take for going somewhere else to be able and doing something else and doing urbanism on the side, as it were, for your own ability to sleep at night and also to continue to have your dignity as like a person. Yeah, don't put your dignity on the side, but while you're in there, take notes, learn, move on as soon as you can.
I'd like to add to that as a millennial that is always over ambitious in job roles. It's hard to just let a job be a job, but as long as you know you're doing your part,
Yes,
morally, ethically, like she said, try not to let it go home with you. Trust me. Last question, and then I will close it out. The Wharf neighborhood wasn't always what it is now. It was a multi-billion-dollar investment, and many think it's been gentrified and has essentially eliminated what was once a Black neighborhood. How do you convince others that this is a positive approach toward a Black urbanist future?
I mean, I think we need to still have that open dialogue. I think we don't need to be scared that there are still members of our neighborhood in public housing, and we need to remove that stigma. Part of the reason that people are scared of what's happening on this waterfront is that we are sitting here waiting on 1-for-1 replacements in our nearby public housing. Unfortunately, our public housing agency is in the news seemingly every week because something's not being done properly. So we have to hold these organizations accountable, everyone from like our community development corporations to these agencies. We have to continue to hold them accountable. And we also have to think about our own speech and our own family members. Like, I'm that person at the dinner table saying, hey, it was nothing wrong with those housing projects. What was wrong with them was they weren't being taken care of. What was wrong with it was people weren't making enough money to live somewhere else. What was wrong was like you looking around and like squinching yourself up because you see people in the neighborhood that you think you don't like. So all I can speak for is it starts at home. And of course, we live in one of the wealthiest Black regions in the United States, if not the world. The wealth is still here in this region. We have to ask ourselves if we're worried about the wharf gentrification, are we worried about what's happening when people only see us clamoring for sprawling neighborhoods in Prince George's County and Charles County? Like, are people seeing the wrong idea there? Are we ourselves, are we really there for those communities? And when we do have an opportunity to communicate with those folks and do the outreach, are we making that outreach? And yeah, like I said before, we got to be okay with under 30% AMI opportunities. We do need to be ready to provide a basic level of public service. And I am happy that we do have a new fish watch, but we could still use another one or two. We could still use a grocery store that stays open later. Once again, that's maybe we need to partner with a different grocery provider that is not nationally and internationally afraid of certain customer base. Maybe it's that we create, as we're having this conversation on Black businesses of color, like all the incentives, incentivizing and really supporting businesses to get bigger. Like, why don't we have more grocery stores in communities of color? Like, now, maybe this is more of a Black American thing, because like obviously H Mart and those kinds of stores exist. When we were doing with Black bookstores, when we were buying Black, spending Black, like doing that support and giving folks what they need. And also, yeah, it's commerce, it's trade, it's community, like mutual community sharing. It's not taking advantage, it's not exploitation. But I think because we have that history of exploitation happening, harms, aggressive removal, and even right now, agencies who are not providing basic needs and keep kicking the can down, and who are scared of some of these developers, whereas some developers are learning how to do it differently, and they're seeing the benefits, and they're realizing that they can have some of what they want and still be a humane provider of a service.
All right. That's a really good answer. I would add, like you said from the beginning, it's a paradigm shift. It's changing what people perceive, like you said, public housing to be, projects to be. I think everybody knows you're closer to being homeless than being a billionaire in some perspective or another. Like,
yes.
It's definitely it's in the eye of the beholder. You know what I'm saying? Some of your best friends came from the projects, came from public housing, and it wasn't because they were bad people. It was designed for them not to necessarily succeed. So I definitely that's real for sure. So that was
it's a long question, and we're still seeing, like, we're in year 7, I believe, of the revamp. This is literally, this week is like the birthday of the revamp, and then of course the I'm in phase 2 just opened, and so we still have vacancies here. We also still live in like a climate area, but when it's different. There's other areas of the district that are like stamped on. Like, there are a couple of apartment buildings I looked at, I'm like, I can't sleep at night living. I can't sleep at night living in here, and I definitely don't want to pay this. And so, yeah, I want district government, if you're hearing me, and this is my opinion, do not hold my partner accountable to this, but my personal opinion as a resident of this region, continuing to support us, continuing to provide the business support, continuing to provide that subsidy, like that critical mass that's here, that culture. You know, people are looking at our culture, our local culture. If you want that to be able to stay, if you want that to be the draw, if you want people to visit not just the National Mall, but also local DC and have a community partnership, you cannot be afraid to give opportunities and give spaces. I want to shout out the Sandlot, which is actually just across the river from us. That has been built as a community space. I'm forever seeing go-go bands, and they did like, I think they had like a sneaker person, and like, we just had art all night. Practically every neighborhood in the district had like an arts thing. We did dine all night this year. We were supporting the restaurants. But I am most worried about supermarket companies, pharmacies, health corporations, and even some landlords and housing providers that are not with the program, and their misbehavior is going to make it look, it's going to be such a drag on everybody else. Like, if we're living in a world where Beyonce's concert can be a $4 million driver just from concert tickets. Now, some will say the concert tickets were a lot, but even if she just had all those, if she had done residencies at all the stadiums and all the places for like $20, $30, there's still art driving funding. And so let's look at our corporate mix. Let's look at what kind of corporations, and of course, cities that have the access to the business licenses and the eminent domain. I know they're putting pressure on you, but there's an opportunity to reach out and build in other people and other ways to sustain the work that we want to do.
Very dope. So I know we ran a little bit over time, but thank y'all so much for joining, for your questions, for your input, for engaging. Thank you again so much, Kristen, for your time putting this together, being a colleague, and now I say a friend, and a mentor as I've grown in my profession and even been at this organization. So thank y'all so much. See y'all on the next On the Park Bench.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for hanging out later.